Hey everyone, welcome back to the 25th episode of the Huggy Poker Vlog. I'm Huggy, and today's episode takes place at the Lodge in Texas. Before we dive into the session, I want to just share some quick progress on sessions that haven't appeared on the vlog. Not all my sessions are wins, things have been kind of up and down recently. I don't want to share only the wins on the vlog. I had one particularly big loss playing 1-3 right before my live stream, and although I was planning to release an episode of the vlog to cover that session, I just haven't gotten around to it due to lack of time and even worse energy since it's cedar season in Texas and my allergies are terrible. With that in mind, I'm going to take a few of the hands from that session and put them into some YouTube shorts instead, including the biggest pot I've ever lost in my life for over $3,000. That one stung. So be on the lookout for those. Also, with my sessions being up and down recently, with more of the down ones being in my 1-3 games, I've decided that I'm going to primarily stick with 1-2 in the short term, just continuing to dip my toes into the bigger stakes occasionally. Consider 1-2 my bread and butter when it comes to poker. It's just where I'm more comfortable at the moment, and I'm okay with continuing to build my bankroll there as long as needed. And with that, this most recent session takes place during a 1-2 game, but don't let the stakes fool you. This is an absolutely massive episode. Let's check out the action. In the first interesting hand of the session, we've got 10-9 suited. I raise the $10 under the gun, the +2 player calls, and the small blind re-raises to 40. The big blind cold calls, and I make a pretty loose call since there's so much in the pot, and the +2 player calls as well, so the four of us head to the flop. The flop comes 5-ace-7 with 2 diamonds, so we flop a flush draw, but not much else, and any hand holding an ace is pretty happy here. The small blind checks now, so either he's got a big ace and is looking to trap, or he's got an underpair and hates the ace on the board. The big blind checks as well, and I put out a bet of $50. The +2 player folds, and the small blind check raises to 200. The big blind folds, so it's heads up, and I've only got another 65 behind, which honestly, I should have probably just shipped in on the flop, so I make the call hoping to improve. We hit our flush on the turn, our opponent shows ace-queen suited for top 2, and we nearly triple up in our first big pot.
Thank you.
10 minutes later, we're dealt ace-9 offsuit. We see 2 limps, and I raise the $12 in the hijack. The small blind and both limpers make the call, and the three of us head to a flop of 9-king-ace rainbow. Everyone checks to me, and I c-bet for $30 with top and bottom pair. Just the last limper makes the call, so we're heads up to the turn, which comes the 4 of clubs. He checks to me again, and I bet a little larger, hoping for a crying call from a bare ace, making it $75. We get another call, and I'm hoping for a clean river, which we get in the form of the 6 of spades. He checks once more, and I ship it all in for my last $227. After a bit of thinking, he unfortunately lays it down, but we're happy to win a nice pot.
Good beat.
Thank you.
2 hands later, we've got ace-jack offsuit under the gun. I've raised the last 3 hands from early position, so I decide to play this one a little more passively. I limp in, and the +1 player immediately raises to 20. I've played with this player on a number of occasions, and I know he's pretty solid, so when we see one other caller in between, I have no reason to go for a squeeze, and I just make the call. The flop is pretty favorable for us when it comes out ace-jack-queen with 2 hearts. We flop 2 pair with the backdoor nut flush draw, and unless we're up against ace-queen, we're likely ahead. I decide to approach this hand with a check call on the flop, planning to push hard on any safe turn. I check to the razor, and he leads for half pot, $30. The third player folds, and I make the call as intended. On the turn, we see the 10 of diamonds. This is pretty much the worst card we could hope to see here, and I think given my opponent's likely raising range, we'll have to give up if he continues. I check to him, and he puts out a bet of $100. It's a pretty big bet, and if there wasn't a flush draw out there, I'd consider that it could be a bluff since it's not going to get called by that much. But knowing my opponent, he's probably hoping to not get outdrawn at this point, and I lay our hand down. 15 minutes later, we look down at pocket kings in the +1 position. The end of the gun player limps, and I raise to $12. 5 players end up making the call, and the 6 of us head to a pretty ugly flop of 7-8-ace with 2 diamonds. It checks to me, and I've got no reason to bet in this wide field of players, so I check as well, and it surprisingly checks around. The turn brings the 8 of diamonds. The board is pretty ugly. We lose to any ace or 8, plus there's a flush draw out there now. It checks around again to the button, who now puts out a bet of $25. Everyone folds back to me, and although I should probably fold, there's a part of me thinking that this is such a small bet from a player who's got position, we could still be ahead versus a 7 or a flush draw. I decide to make what might be a bad call here to reevaluate on the river. We're now heads up, where we see a pretty great river in the form of the king of diamonds. So we improve to a boat, meaning we're beating any holding containing an 8 or a diamond. My opponent looks like he's interested in betting, so I check again, and he bets out for $100. He's only got another 100 or so behind, so I push all in expecting a call. Unfortunately, either he was bluffing or the 4th diamond killed our action as he makes the fold. I'm not sure if the king saved us or we were legitimately ahead, but I'm glad to have another pot coming our way.
Thank you.
20 minutes later, we're dealt the best hand in poker. 6-9 suited in hearts. There's 2 limps, and I raised to $15 in position on the button. The big blind and both limpers call, so we've got 4 of us head to the flop. We catch a whole lot of nothing on the flop when it comes king 4 deuce with 2 diamonds, and the big blind makes a weak lead for $15. Most of the time, when I see a lead like this into the pre-flop raiser, it's a hand like second pair at best, though occasionally it's top pair with a weak kicker. When it folds to me, I decide to make a play for the pot, and I raise to $50. Our play works, our opponent folds, and we take it down.
Thank you.
4 hands later, we look down at pocket queen sitting in the middle position. The +1 player raises to $10, and I 3-bet to $35. And it's Texas, so the next 4 players behind all cold call my 3-bet. The original raiser folds, so the 5 of us head to an interesting flop of 7-9-8 suited in spades. We've got an overpair with the queen of spades, but it's a pretty coordinated board, and I'm out of position versus 4 other players. I feel like betting here doesn't really give me much information in terms of where I stand if I get called or raised, so I opt just to check and see how the action unfolds. The cutoff ends up leading for $40, and the button, who's a bit of an OMC type player, a really friendly guy, but only pushing hard when he's got a strong hand after the flop, shoves over the top for his last $146. When he does this, I'm sure I'm behind, and I decide to throw my hand into the muck. The original better ends up folding as well, so unfortunately we don't get to see for sure if my fold was correct, but I'm pretty sure it was.
You flop it, huh?
2 hands later, we've got ace-10 suited in clubs under the gun. There have been a lot of 3-bets at this table, and I'm basically at the bottom of my ace-high raising range in this position, so I decide to limp with the intention to call a raise rather than raising and possibly getting 3-bet off my hand. The +2 player raises to $15, 2 other players make the call, and I call as well. I check dark, and the 4 of us head to a flop of queen-10-queen with 2 hearts. The pre-flop raiser c-bets for $30, the other 2 players fold, and I call with our 2 pair. The turn brings the 5 of clubs. This shouldn't change anything, and I don't want to check and let my opponent make a big bet blow us off our hand. Instead, I decide to make a blocking bet to see how he reacts, making it $25. He doesn't look happy, but he does make the call, so I'm hoping to not see any paint on the river if he's got a hand like ace-king, ace-jack, king-jack, or jack-9. Unfortunately, we get what I'd consider one of the worst cards for those holdings when the river brings the king of spades. I check to our opponent expecting a bet, but he surprisingly checks back. I show our pair of 10s, and somehow, someway, it's good. Actually, it turns out I misread the board, and it wasn't until reviewing this hand for the vlog that I realized the river was actually the king of clubs giving us a flush. If I had realized that at the time, this would have been an easy river bet, and we likely missed out on some value considering the range I put my opponent on. 3 hands later, we've got pocket 8s on the button. It folds to the hijack, who raises to $12. I call with position, and the big blind calls as well, so the 3 of us head to the flop, which comes 9-3-10 with 2 clubs. Both players check to me, and I decide to bet $20 to protect our hand in case we're ahead. Just the big blind calls, so we're heads up to the turn, which brings the 9 of hearts pairing the board. This is a pretty good card since it means there's less of a chance our opponent has a 9, so when he checks again, I decide to bet once more, making it $25 this time. Looking back, my bet size was too small, and I think making it closer to 45 or 50 would be more appropriate. We get called again, and we head to a pretty unfortunate river of the 10 of clubs. We get counterfeited, and when our opponent checks a 3rd time, I hastily check back. I'm really unhappy with my check back here since there are a ton of draws my opponent could have had that easily would have folded to a river bet here. I show my hand, and he shows Jack 8 off for the busted gut shot, but scoops the pot with his Jack high kicker.
Jack high is good.
Even if you bet him a little bit at a time.
Yeah, I should have.
15 minutes later, we look down at pocket aces. We see a couple of limps, and the middle position player raises to 15. I 3-bet to $45 on the button, and unfortunately, everyone folds. We take down the first pot ever without a flop in the history of Texas poker. About 30 minutes pass before we pick up king 9 offsuit sitting in the hijack. It folds to me, and I raise to $10. Just the button calls, so we're heads up to the flop where we see 3-4-4 rainbow. This board should favor my raising range since it's unlikely his hand hits it, so I c-bet for $15. My opponent, who is the same player who won versus my counterfeited 8s and likes to call down a lot of draws, unsurprisingly makes the call. The turn brings the 6 of spades. I'm still not expecting my opponent to have much here with how he's been playing, so I double barrel making it 30 this time. He quickly calls again, so we're definitely hoping to improve on the river. And thankfully we do when it comes the king of clubs giving us top pair. I suspect my opponent will take a stab at the pot if I check to him, so I do just that, and he puts out a bet of 55. I quickly call, and he shows ace 7 for ace high. Our pair of kings is good, and we take it down.
Not there. Not there to check.
10 minutes later, we're under the gun, and I decide to straddle for $4 to mix it up. The +1 player, who's the same villain from the last several hands, re-straddles to 15. It folds around to the button who calls. I look down at ace 10 suited, and I consider raising, but I have a feeling that if I flat here, the +1 player will raise his option if given the chance with just about anything, so I go with the call. He ends up doing exactly as I expected, making it 45. The button calls, and now I re-raise to 200, hoping to take it down. Surprisingly, the +1 player insta-calls my raise, leaving himself about 300 behind. The button player eventually decides he's going to push it all in for 283 total, which is not enough to reopen the action, so I call for $83 more, as does the +1 player. We've got 3 players headed to the flop in a massive pot. I consider blind shoving all in before it comes, which would look pretty strong, but I don't expect it's going to get any hand that beats us to fold, so I ultimately decide against it. The flop comes deuce-5 queen with 2 diamonds. We don't improve, and I really don't think we're going to get any hand that beats us to fold with a bet, so I check expecting the +1 player to shove his stack in. Surprisingly, he checks back, so we get a free turn, which comes the 10 of hearts, giving us a pair. Given the check back on the flop, I definitely think we're ahead now. I consider shoving, but I think if given the chance, my opponent might shove his own stack if I check to him, since checking here would show weakness twice. I go with a check, but he ends up checking back once more, so off to the river we go, where we see the 6 of diamonds. This shouldn't change anything, and I don't think my opponent's going to call with a worse hand at this point, so I check just hoping he'll take a stab at the pot. He checks back for a 3rd time, so I show our pair of 10s expecting it to be good. The +1 player mucks, and the button shows the deuce of hearts for bottom pair before mucking, and we take it down. According to the button's neighbor, he shoved all in with 3 deuce hoping to get lucky, and was mad that he didn't win since he flopped a deuce and thought he was good given that we checked it down.
Ace king, top pair, top kicker.
Thank you.
3 hands later, we've got 5-4 suited and spades on the button. The middle position player raises to $12. I call with position, the small blind calls, and the 3 of us head to a flop of 10-8 deuce with 2 spades. So we flop a flush draw, but nothing else. The small blind leads for 20, and the middle position player re-raises all in for 115 total. We're not getting a good price on our draw, and even though I'd like to see the run out, I've got to let this one go. The small blind makes the call, so at least we get to see the outcome.
Good luck, guys.
So you told him to make it. I had it from 8, 9, 10. It was really good. Very pleased with that. Oh, yeah. Queen would have given me 12, unless somebody had 10 ace. And that's if the club didn't have.
Our opponents showed Jack 8 suited in diamonds for our second pair, and Ace 10 suited in clubs for top pair, and our fold was good. Almost 30 minutes later, we look down at pocket 4s in the low jack. We see a few limps, and I limp as well to go set mining. The cutoff raises to $15, the button calls, 2 of the limpers call, and I call as well, so the 5 of us head to the flop, which comes deuce 9-4 rainbow, jackpot. We've got second set on a pretty dry board. We all check to the raiser, who opts to check back as well. The button doesn't let it check through though, putting out a bet of $30. Everyone folds to me, and given how dry the board is, I'm not scared of too many turn cards, so I just make the call. The original raiser folds, so we're heads up to the turn, which brings an inconsequential jack of clubs. I check again, and now he makes a more sizable bet of $70. This player was talking earlier about Vegas versus Texas play, and I take it they're a competent player from some of the conversation I've heard. I've seen him make a few bluffs, but given the way the board is running out, I don't think there are bluffs that make sense here that he could be trying to run. There are only a few hands that make sense, and 2 of them I consider are pocket 9s and pocket deuces. I don't think pocket 9s makes as much sense here since he didn't raise pre-flop, so if we raise and get shoved on, I really think it might be pocket deuces. Having thought it through, I go ahead and check raise, making it 200 straight. He immediately goes all in for 518 total, and I insta-call.
You overset me?
Oh, no.
Maybe. If you got deuces, I did.
King 10 on the
Ah.
board already.
Sorry, man. That's tough break.
We scoop our biggest pot of the night for almost $1,200.
When it does, you will lose. The lower set will lose.
Thank you. Thank you.
25 minutes later, we look down at ace queen offsuit in the cutoff. There's 2 limpers, and I raised to $15. We see 3 calls, and the 4 of us head to a pretty great flop of 4-7 queen rainbow. One of the limpers leads into me for $20. I've played with this guy a fair amount, and he tends to lead with middle or bottom pair a lot, so I'm not really worried. On a scarier board, I'd consider raising to protect my hand, but there's not a lot I'm concerned about here, so I opt just to call. Both other players fold, so we're heads up to the turn, which brings the 8 of clubs. This shouldn't help too many hands other than 8-7 or 6-5. Our opponent checks, and I grab a stack of reds and put it out. The dealer counts it out, and it's $55. After a bit of thinking, our opponent folds, and we take down another one.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
4 hands later, we've got King 10 suited and hearts under the gun. There's been a lot of banter about how hot I'm running, and I'm getting a lot of respect post-flop, so I opened my raising range a little, making it $10 first to act. The cutoff button and both blinds call, and the 5 of us head to the flop of 6, 7, 10 rainbow. So we flop top pair, but there's a straight draw out there. It checks to me, and I lead for half pot, $25. We only get one fold, so the 4 of us are headed to the turn where we see the ace of clubs. This is a pretty terrible card for us given how many players are in the hand, and when it checks to me, I check back. The button decides to put out a bet of $50. I don't have too much of a read on this guy, but I don't see a reason for him to bluff into such a wide field of players, so I lay our hand down. The river brings the 3 of clubs, so the backdoor flush comes in, and the friendly OMC type player from earlier leads for $100. The button folds, and we don't get to see anyone's hand, but I feel pretty confident that our fold was good. 5 hands later, we get the best hand in poker twice in one night, 6-9 of hearts. The middle position player raises to $10, and I call in the hijack with position. 2 other players join along as well, and the 4 of us see a flop of 5 deuce 8 rainbow. The raiser c-bets for $25, and with our gut shot and deep stacks in position, I decide to float here in hopes of improving, with the idea that we could also potentially steal the pot later if we don't improve. Funny side conversation, I've been helping out the dealer by selling chips along the way to players rebuying since I've got such a massive stack at this point, many of which have gone to the better in this hand who's rebought a few times. The friendly OMC player makes a pretty funny comment.
Not only are you getting his paper money, you're trying to get his chip too?
Yeah, you know, got to come from all angles.
Right, yeah.
Both other players fold, so we're heads up to the turn, which brings the 9 of spades. We hit top pair, and now our opponent leads for $20. Given how weak of a bet this is after his initial flop bet sizing, I'm pretty confident that we're in the lead. However, our hand isn't that strong, and I don't want to bloat the pot, so I opt just to call. The river brings a beautiful 9 of clubs, giving us trips. Our opponent checks now, and given that our opponent bet twice, I think he could have a pair on this board. I make it $100 hoping he thinks we're bluffing, but he ends up making the fold, and we take the pot.
Thank you.
The very next hand, we're dealt 9-8 offsuit sitting in the low jack. We see a few limps, and I decide to limp along as well. The blind's complete, and the 6 of us head to the flop, which comes 7 jack 5 with 2 hearts. So we've got a double gut shot. Any 6 or 10 gives us a straight. It checks to me, and I lead for $10. We get 2 calls, and the 3 of us see a beautiful turn of the 6 of spades, giving us the absolute nuts. Both players check again, and I make it $30 this time. Just the player from the last hand calls, so we're heads up to the river, which brings the 6 of clubs pairing the board. This isn't the best card since we no longer have the nuts, but no one's played their hand like they had 2 pair or a set prior to this point, so I'm inclined to believe we're good. Our opponent checks to us again, and I make it $55, hoping for a crying call. Surprisingly, our opponent check raises all in for $203 total. I'm not quite sure what he's got, but I can't fold, so I make the call. Our opponent shows 9-6 off for river trips, and I show our straight, taking it down.
Thank you.
10 minutes later, we've got ace-king off on the button. There's 4 limpers, and I raise to $17 with position. 2 players make the call, and we head to a not-so-great flop of 7 jack 9 with 2 spades. Both players check to me, and this flop definitely hits the range more than it hits mine, so I opt just to check back, hoping to improve on the turn. And we do just that when the turn comes the king of hearts, giving us top pair. It's still a pretty coordinated board, so when the first player to act leads for $20, I'm not really sure where I stand. The other player folds, and I decide to go with a play that I don't normally make, min raising to 40. I've got 2 goals with this action. The first is to see how our opponent responds, whether he goes with a call versus a raise. The second is that, assuming he just calls, then he'll probably check to us on the river, meaning we can avoid a big river bet that leaves us in an uncomfortable spot. Our opponent goes with a call, and we see the 4 of hearts on the river, bringing in the backdoor flush. Our opponent checks to us, and as planned, I check back.
Top pair. Thank you.
3 hands later, we've got ace-5 suited and hearts in middle position. There's a straddle for $5, and the +1 player just calls. I raise to $20, and we see 3 players behind us make the call before the big blind re-raises all in for $66 total. It folds back to me, and I don't mind getting it in against the short stack player, but I don't really want to call and have a bunch of other players join in as well. Given that, I re-raise to $150 in hopes of getting it heads up. We get our wish when everyone else folds.
Yeah, I'll give you protection, you know. What do you want to do?
I run it once or 3 times. I do not run
It's up to you, whatever you want.
3 times.
Okay.
3 times. 3 more.
We got a button for it now. Nice.
I think that one might be me.
That's me.
Oh, you got the flush, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, those were all my outs. Another deuce. Come on. Oh, there it is.
There you go.
All right.
One time,
It comes down to the last one.
Oh my goodness.
So close.
Yeah, that's sick.
You could chop with a 3. Maybe. I don't know what you have. Oh, wow. You were ahead, yeah. So I think I get 2/3.
Yeah. I get 1/3. I'm happy with 1/3.
Yeah, yes.
I get one.
Yeah, he gets a short one.
It works that way.
That's good, yeah. Yeah.
4 hands later, we've got pocket 8s on the big blind. There's 2 limps, and the button raises to $12. I call, and the 2 limpers call as well, so we've got 4 of us headed to the flop, which comes 3-8-3 rainbow. So we just flop a boat. Why not? Everyone checks to the pre-flop raiser, who leads out for $20. I call since we're way ahead and don't want to scare anyone off, and everyone else folds, so we're heads up to the turn. The turn brings the 10 of clubs. I quickly check, and as soon as I do, I'm actually wishing I had taken a little more time to think about it and led the turn instead. This opponent seems like a pretty smart player, and I don't think he's going to make a bet given that I could have a 3 in my hand, which would put him way behind even if he had an overpair. As expected, he checks back, and we get a free river in the form of the 6 of clubs. I lead out for $45 hoping for a call, but unfortunately for us, we're just too far ahead and our opponent folds.
No, I think I mostly just looked online. Thank you.
A few hands later, we've got ace-8 offsuit in the hijack. The under the gun player straddles for 7, and when it folds to me, I raise to 27. It folds back to the straddle, who ships it all in for 49 total. It's only 22 more to me, so I make the call, and we get a full run out.
You got an 8. 6.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Nice.
Bam.
4 hands later, we've got king-8 suited in spades under the gun. I limp in since we've had a lot of limps getting through, and we see it raise to $10, followed by 3 callers, so I call as well. The 5 of us head to the flop, which comes deuce 4 jack with 2 spades. The small blind leads for $15, and with our flush draw, I decide to get aggressive in hopes of folding out some holdings that are ahead of us. I raise to 40, and the initial raiser cold calls our raise. It folds back around to the button, who 3-bets all in for 165 total. Trying to do some quick math at the table, I see there's close to 325 in the pot, and it's costing me 125 to call, giving me about 2.5 to 1. I've got 9 outs twice, which is pretty close to 2.5 to 1 odds to hit, so I ultimately end up making the call. The pre-flop raiser folds, so we're heads up on the run out.
Want to do anything?
Just do 1.
Running it one time.
Leads me to drinking.
Hit the flush.
Leads me to drinking mad fast.
Our opponent said he had 2 pairs, so we definitely got lucky to hit our hand there. 5 hands later, we look down at pocket aces in the hijack. There's 4 limpers, and I raise on the larger side, making it $20. This table's been pretty active, so I'm expecting a number of calls, but we just get 1 call from the OMC player. He checks dark before seeing the flop, which comes 6-10-4 rainbow. I c-bet for 30, and our opponent makes an astute comment.
If you're betting me with the board, how do you get 10 on it? I'm going to fold.
He makes a good fold, and we take it down. The very next hand, we've got queen 10 suited in clubs in the +2 position. The under the gun player straddles for 5, and I raise to 20. The middle position player, big blind, and under the gun straddler all make the call, and the 4 of us head to the flop, which comes 9-king-3 with 2 spades. So we flop a gut shot, but otherwise I'm not too excited about this board. It checks to me, and I decide to check as well. The last player checks back, so we get a free turn, which comes the deuce of clubs, giving us the flush draw to go with our gut shot. The big blind goes all in for his last $32. It's a pretty small bet relative to the pot, and given the number of outs we have to hit our hand, I've got a call here. Everyone else folds, so we're heads up when the river brings the 5 of clubs.
The flush. The combo draw. Thank you. Thank you.
3 hands later, we've got queen 8 suited in hearts. There's an early position raise of 15, 2 players call, and I call as well to defend in the big blind. The flop comes jack queen 10 with 2 diamonds, so we flop top pair in the dumb end of an inside straight draw. There's a ton of hands that could easily be ahead of us though, and even with top pair, I'm not excited about putting more money in the pot. We all check the pre-flop raiser, who goes all in for his last $52. Both other players call, and I can't imagine we're ahead here, so I throw our hand away.
Go on.
3 players, 1 all in, starting over there. Check to you, sir. Check. How about now? That's all in.
The second all-in player shows king 8 off, which we were ahead of on the flop, but would have lost to on the river. We don't get to see what our other opponents had, so I'm unsure if we were ahead or behind prior to that, but I'm still happy with my fold overall. The last interesting hand of the night is the very next hand when we're dealt pocket 8s in the big blind. There's 2 limpers, and the cutoff raises to $25. I call with our pair, and the hijack calls as well, so the 3 of us head to the flop, which comes 4-10-10 rainbow. We both check to the pre-flop raiser, who c-bets for half pot, $40. This isn't a bad board for us, and I would expect the raiser to c-bet any hand here, so I call with the intention of reevaluating on the turn. The hijack folds, so we're heads up to the turn, which brings a third 10, giving us the boat. This shouldn't change anything though. We're either still ahead or still behind where we were before. I check once more, and now our opponent slows down and checks back. I feel better about our hand, but I don't really want to see any paint on the river. Unfortunately, we don't get our wish when the river brings the queen of diamonds. I check again, and our opponent checks back once more. I show our hand, and it's good.
Thank you.
What an incredible night of poker. Things started off slow, but we ended up running absolutely hot, hitting every draw, making tons of hands, and just stacking opponents left and right. This ended up being the biggest winning session of my life, which is crazy considering it's at the smallest live stakes offered. We bought in for $200, and after 5 hours of play, cashed out for $26.49. After tips and the hourly rate, that amounts to a profit of $2,395. Insane. The bankroll was wavering around the 10K mark for the first couple of weeks this year, but with this, we're now sitting at just over 12K. This was the first session I played after deciding to stick mostly to 1-2, and these results give me some reassurance that that's probably the right idea for the time being. Like I said, I'll still dip my toes into some of the bigger stakes here and there, but 1-2 really is my bread and butter game. One more exciting call out, with the biggest meetup game in Texas history taking place at the Lodge on January 25th, I'll be giving out stickers for the vlog. If you see me before then and want one, let me know. I'll be carrying them around to share. Otherwise, maybe I'll see you there and you can get one then. Before we go, I just want to say that there are a lot of you out there watching the vlog that haven't subscribed. If you're coming back to watch anyway, I'd really love if you could hit the subscribe button. It really helps out the channel, and knowing you're interested in watching really gives me the incentive to keep publishing these things. So please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and as always, I'll respond to you. Until next time, thanks for watching. Take care.